The station hung in the void like a grand, multifaceted jewel, a testament to 10,000 years of peace. It was the Conclave, the beating heart of galactic governance, where violence was a concept discussed only in history archives and sanitized simulations. Here, biology had been overcome. Instinct had been bred out, legislated away, or surgically suppressed. The council chamber was a vast amphitheater of polished obsidian and bioluminescent lichen, designed to soothe the senses of the 300-member species. Thalric shifted his weight on his 4 slender legs, his hooves making a nervous clicking sound against the floor tiles. He was a Hylotian, a species that had evolved on vast, grassy plains as herd grazers. His large, side-facing eyes gave him a 360-degree view of the chamber, a trait that had once saved his ancestors from pouncing beasts, but now simply made him excellent at reading the room's diplomatic undercurrents. He glanced at the datapad in his manipulator tendrils. "We are ready for the intake assessment," Thalric murmured, his voice a soft, melodic trill. "The species is designated Terran, newcomers from the Spiral Arm's chaotic outer rim." Beside him stood Chorus, a reptilian delegate from the Drakari coalition. Chorus was massive, encased in ceremonial armor that was purely decorative, as the Drakari had not fought a war in 6 centuries. His ancestors had been ambush predators, but eons of genetic tinkering and cultural conditioning had dulled their edges. Chorus looked bored, his nictitating membranes flicking sluggishly over vertical pupils. "Another charity case," Chorus grumbled, the universal translator smoothing his guttural growl into a polite monotone. "I have reviewed their biology report. Soft skin, no carapace, no natural weapons to speak of. Their planetary gravity is high, yes, but their atmospheric composition is standard. They are likely scavengers or lowland foragers who got lucky with tool usage." Thalric scrolled through the file. "They have achieved faster-than-light travel only recently. Their technology is crude, explosive-based, primitive. It is a wonder they did not destroy themselves before reaching us. That is the usual trajectory for Class II civilizations," Chorus noted. "They discover fission panic, and then the Council steps in to guide them before they hurt themselves. I expect they will be terrified. The scale of the Conclave usually sends these new species into catatonic shock." The chamber doors, massive slabs of neutron-dense alloy, groaned deep in their mechanisms. The vibration hummed through the floor, silencing the murmurs of the gathered delegates. The atmospheric recyclers hissed, adjusting the mixture to accommodate the newcomers. "Let us be gentle," Thalric said, smoothing the fur on his flank. "We must not startle them." The doors parted. Thalric expected a huddle. He expected a group of creatures clinging to one another for comfort, eyes darting wildly, overwhelmed by the sensory overload of 1,000 alien species staring down at them. He expected the skittish movement of prey or the blustering, noisy overcompensation of insecure scavengers. Instead, silence walked into the room. There were 5 of them. They were bipedal, standing upright on 2 limbs that seemed dangerously unstable, yet propelled them with a fluid, terrifying grace. They did not huddle. They walked in a wedge formation, spaced perfectly apart, moving with a synchronized rhythm that spoke of drill and discipline. Thalric felt a primal shiver ripple down his spine, a sensation he had not felt since he was a hatchling dreaming of ancestral monsters. The figure at the front was a female, her skin a deep, rich brown, clad in a crisp uniform of charcoal gray. Unlike the flowing robes or organic weaves of the Council, her attire was severe, tailored, and buttoned tight. But it was not the clothes that froze the breath in Thalric's throat. It was the eyes. They were forward-facing. 2 almond-shaped orbs, dark and glistening, set deep beneath a bony ridge. They did not scan the room in a wide, protective arc. They locked on. They focused. The female stopped at the designated podium and her head did not swivel. She turned her entire upper body, and those eyes swept across the lower tiers of the amphitheater, dissecting everything in their path. "Binocular vision," Chorus whispered, and for the first time the boredom was gone from the Drakari's voice. "Depth perception, target acquisition." Thalric could not look away. The biology report had mentioned this, but seeing it was different. In the Conclave, forward-facing eyes were rare, usually found in species that had evolved from arboreal fruit pickers. But the focus in these human eyes was not the curiosity of a gatherer. It was the assessment of a hunter. The leader tapped the microphone. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent hall. Honored delegates of the conclave, the human spoke, her voice modulating perfectly through the translators. I am Ambassador Solara Vance of the United Earth Republics. We thank you for this audience. She smiled. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. To 100 species present, the baring of teeth was a prelude to violence. It was a threat display. Yet the human's voice was calm, modulated, polite. The contrast sent a wave of cognitive dissonance crashing through the assembly. Thalric felt his flight-or-fight response, buried under centuries of civilization, twitching in his hind legs. She is displaying fangs, he whispered to Chorus. Why is she displaying fangs while offering thanks? It is a social gesture for them, Chorus replied, though his own claws were digging into the soft armrest of his podium. I believe they call it smiling, but you are right. Those are omnivore teeth, incisors for shearing, canines for tearing, molars for crushing. The intake proceedings began with the standard biological scan and cultural assessment. A floating drone, resembling a silver sphere, drifted down toward the human delegation. It cast a sheet of blue light over Ambassador Vance and her team. One of the humans behind her, a male with broad shoulders and pale skin, shifted slightly. His hand moved toward his waist in a blur of motion, stopping only millimeters from his belt before relaxing. It happened in less than a second. Did you see that? Chorus hissed. Reaction time, Thalric noted, his heart's beating frantically. He tracked the drone. He calculated its vector. He was preparing to intercept. The drone chirped, displaying holographic schematics of human physiology for the council to see. The image rotated, stripping away skin to show muscle and bone. See, Chorus pointed out, trying to regain his composure. No claws, no venom sacs. Their skin is incredibly fragile. A simple laceration could be fatal. They have no natural armor. They are soft. Thalric looked at the density of the muscle fibers in the hologram. He looked at the skeletal structure, designed for shock absorption and endurance. They are soft on the outside, he agreed, but look at the adrenal glands. Look at the size of them, and the scarring on the male's tissue. That is not from accidents. That is from combat. The presiding counselor, a gelatinous entity floating in a tank of methane named goo, bubbled a question through the speakers. Ambassador Vance, the biological scan indicates high levels of cortisol and adrenaline capability. Your species appears built for high-stress environments. Please explain your evolutionary niche. Were you foragers? Vance placed her hands on the podium. Her fingers were long, dexterous, capable of playing a violin, or, Thalric realized with a jolt, strangling a throat. We were persistence hunters, Counselor Vance said. Her tone was conversational, as if discussing the weather. We did not have claws or wings. We ran. We tracked. We exhausted our prey until they collapsed from heat stroke or fatigue. We walked them to death. Silence stretched tight across the chamber. Persistence hunting was a myth to most, a nightmare from the dark ages of evolution. To chase a thing not for a minute but for days. To simply keep coming, relentless and unceasing. We are also adapters, Vance continued. We consume plant matter, meat, fungi. We can survive in deserts, tundra, and jungles. We process toxins that would kill many of you, such as caffeine and capsaicin, for recreation. Chorus blinked. They eat poison for fun. The male behind Vance, the one who had twitched, leaned forward and whispered something to the ambassador. She nodded slightly. We understand, Vance said, addressing the room, that our biology might be unsettling to some. We assure you, we have long since sublimated our baser instincts into commerce, art, and sport. We are here to learn and to serve. Serve, Thalric thought, or consume. The session was adjourned for a recess, a standard break to allow the delegates to converse and the newcomers to rest. The reception hall was a lavish affair, stocked with nutrient pastes and synthesized proteins suitable for all known biology. Thalric found himself drawn to the human delegation, morbid curiosity pulling him in. He watched as they approached the buffet. The variety of food was meant to be inclusive, but most species stuck to their specific dietary needs. Ambassador Vance picked up a plate. She selected a fibrous root vegetable, a cluster of sweet berries, and then, without hesitation, a slab of synthesized protein that mimicked the texture of seared muscle tissue. She cut it with a knife. Thalric watched the metal blade slice through the fibers. She did it with surgical precision. She lifted the piece to her mouth, chewed, and swallowed. Then she took a berry. Omnivore, a delegate from the avian clade, whispered nearby, feathers ruffled in disgust. It is unnatural to eat flesh and leaf in the same meal. It suggests a chaotic biology, a lack of focus. Thalric stepped forward, his bureaucratic training taking over. Ambassador, he said, dipping his head, I am Thalric of Hylotia. Welcome to the Conclave. Vance turned. That predator gaze locked onto him again. For a second, Thalric felt like a gazelle spotted in the tall grass. Then the tension vanished behind a mask of polite interest. Delegate Thalric, Vance said. A pleasure, your station is magnificent. The rotational gravity is calibrated perfectly. You have an eye for such things? Thalric asked. Vance nodded. My colleague, Colonel Sterling, was just noting the structural integrity of the dome. He estimates it could withstand a kinetic bombardment of significant magnitude. The male, Sterling, nodded. He was eating the protein slab. He didn't cut his as neatly as Vance. He tore it with his teeth, his jaw working efficiently. Nice interlocking fields, Sterling grunted. Good choke points in the corridors, too. Defensible. Thalric stared. You analyze the architecture for defense. Habit, Sterling said, swallowing. You never know when things might go sideways. Thalric felt a cold knot in his second stomach. The Conclave had not seen a physical invasion in 3,000 years. The concept of choke points inside the diplomatic sanctuary was obscene. We are a peaceful coalition, Colonel, Thalric said, trying to sound firm. We do not require defensible corridors. Sterling looked at Thalric. His eyes were a pale, icy blue. A wolf's eyes. Peace is the goal, delegate. Readiness is how you keep it. Vance placed a hand on Sterling's arm, a subtle gesture of restraint. What the colonel means is that humanity has had a turbulent history. We value peace precisely because we know the cost of the alternative. We have read of your wars, Chorus said, stepping up beside Thalric. He towered over the humans, but neither Vance nor Sterling flinched. They did not crane their necks up in submission. They stepped back to maintain a tactical viewing angle. Global conflicts, atomic detonations on your own soil. You nearly rendered your planet uninhabitable. We learned, Vance said softly. Did you? Chorus pressed, his reptilian arrogance surfacing. Or are you just looking for a new hunting ground? The air around the group seemed to drop a few degrees. Sterling stopped chewing. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, slowly, deliberately. He looked at Chorus's neck, right where the scales were thinnest over the jugular vein. It was a glance that lasted less than a second, but it communicated a volume of violence that made Chorus take a half step back. If we wanted a hunting ground, Sterling said, his voice a low rumble, we wouldn't be wearing dress uniforms. Colonel, Vance warned. Her voice was sharp. She turned to Chorus, her smile returning, though it didn't reach her eyes. We are here to trade, Delegate Chorus. We have resources, we have labor, we have art. We are not here to conquer, we are here to join. The recess ended, but the mood had shifted. The curiosity about the primitives had curdled into something else. Unease. The second session of the day was the historical review. This was usually the part where new species showed holographic montages of their greatest achievements. Irrigation systems, great works of philosophy, the unification of their tribes. The humans showed these things. They showed their music, which was complex and mathematical. They showed their architecture reaching for the sky. But they also showed the struggle. The council chamber darkened and the central hologram displayed Earth. Not the blue marble of peace, but a world of fire and ice. Our world is hostile, Vance narrated, tectonic instability. Hurricanes, ice ages. We did not evolve in a garden, we survived an arena. The images shifted. Early humans facing down a mammoth, a creature twice the size of a Dracari. They were small, weak, and armed only with pointed sticks. They attacked in a pack, Thalric observed, narrating for the record, coordinated strikes, flanking maneuvers. They are not overpowering the beast, they are outthinking it. Then came the wars. The humans did not hide them. They showed the clash of bronze, the thunder of gunpowder, the mushroom clouds. Why? Asked a fragile silica-based delegate from the outer ring. Why show us your shame? Because it is who we are, Vance said, standing in the glow of a burning city. We are capable of great destruction. We do not deny this. But because of that capacity, we have developed an equal capacity for restraint. A harmless being is not peaceful, counselors. A harmless being is merely helpless. We are not helpless, we choose peace. The distinction was lost on many, but it hit Thalric like a physical blow. They were claiming that their violence was a virtue, a leash they held in their own hands. The visuals shifted to their space age. The first primitive rockets, the desperate colonization of Mars, the frantic terraforming efforts. They fight the planet itself, Chorus whispered. Look at them. They treat the atmosphere like an enemy combatant. They force the land to yield. The presentation ended with a live feed of the human fleet parked at the edge of the system. It was small compared to the Conclave's defense force, but the ship designs were aggressive. Blocky, angular, covered in kinetic barriers and railgun batteries. Those are not exploration vessels, Chorus noted. Those are warships. Escorts, Vance corrected. The galaxy is a dangerous place. Not here, the High Counselor Gu bubbled. You bring weapons of war to the door of peace. This is a violation of protocol. We will not fire first, Vance said, but we will not be undefended. The debate that followed was chaotic. The herbivore species were terrified. The few predator species were insulted by the humans' arrogance or wary of their potential. Thalric found himself in a side chamber with the human delegation during the deliberation break. He was assigned as their liaison, a task he suspected was a punishment for his curiosity. Colonel Sterling was pacing. It was a prowling motion, back and forth, measuring the room. Please, Colonel, Thalric said, his voice trembling slightly. Your movement, it is distressing. Sterling stopped. Sorry, just burning off energy, do you need to hunt? Thalric asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Sterling laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. No. I had a protein bar, I'm fine. He looked at Thalric. You're Hylotian, right? Grazers, Thalric stiffened. We are an agrarian society, yes. Sterling nodded. You've got eyes on the side of your head. Good peripheral vision. Hard to sneak up on. Why would you want to sneak up on me? Thalric asked. I don't, Sterling said, but someone might. There is no crime on the Conclave, Thalric insisted. Sterling crouched down, bringing his face level with Thalric's. His eyes scanned the alien's face. There's always crime, Thalric. Wherever there are resources and sentient beings, there's someone who wants to take what isn't theirs. We just happen to be honest about it. Vance stepped in. Colonel, leave the liaison alone. He's naive, Solara, Sterling said, standing up. They all are. They think the vacuum of space is a safe space. It is our job to keep it that way, Vance said. The door to the side chamber opened. It was Chorus, accompanied by 2 security drones. The Council has questions regarding your biology, Chorus said, his tone imperious. Specifically, your adrenal response. There is concern that under stress you might become feral. Vance raised an eyebrow. Uncontrollable, Chorus clarified. We wish to conduct a stress test. Sterling's eyes narrowed. What kind of test? A simulation, Chorus said. A standard diplomatic crisis scenario. We want to see if you negotiate, or if you bite. Vance straightened her jacket. We accept. The simulation chamber was a stark white room. Vance and Sterling stood in the center. The Council watched from behind a transparent aluminum barrier. The scenario initiated. Holographic projections filled the room. It was a negotiation gone wrong. An aggressive species, simulated, hulking beasts with plasma rifles, surrounded the humans. They shouted demands, threatened execution, leveled weapons. Thalric watched the biometric readouts on the screen. Their heart rates are elevating, he noted. Cortisol spiking. Now we will see the panic, Chorus said smugly. But there was no panic. On the floor, Vance stood perfectly still. Her hands were clasped behind her back. Her heart rate went up, yes, but it stabilized at a high rhythm. She wasn't hyperventilating, she was oxygenating. She was preparing. Sterling moved slightly in front of her. His hands were open, palms showing the universal sign of submission, but his stance was grounded. Analysis, Thalric whispered. Look at the micro-movements. He is shifting weight to the balls of his feet. He is tracking the barrels of the weapons. The simulated leader lunged at Vance, a massive claw raised to strike. In a standard test, the subject would cower or flee. Sterling did neither. He stepped inside the guard. It was a move so fast the eye could barely follow. He didn't strike the hologram. He knew it wasn't real. But he executed a grapple, a redirection of force that would have shattered the attacker's limb if it had been physical. He stopped his hand an inch from the hologram's throat. Vance didn't flinch. While Sterling neutralized the physical threat, she spoke. "If you strike me," she said to the simulated leader, her voice dropping an octave, becoming hard as diamond, "my fleet will glass your capital within the hour. This is not a threat. It is a mathematical certainty. Stand down." The simulation ended. The holograms flickered out. Silence reigned in the observation booth. They did not flee, the Silica delegate whispered. They counterattacked. And they threatened planetary annihilation. "They remained calm," Thalric said, staring at the readout. "That is the terrifying part. Their pulse was 120 beats per minute, yet their speech patterns remained logical. They were not overwhelmed by fear. They weaponized it." Chorus looked disturbed. "They are predators who can think while they kill." The humans were released from the chamber. Vance looked up at the observation window and nodded, a polite acknowledgement. Sterling cracked his neck, a popping sound that echoed through the audio pickups. The council convened for a private emergency session. "We cannot admit them," the avian delegate screeched. "They are wolves in the fold. If we reject them," Chorus argued, his voice heavy with reluctant pragmatism, "what do they do? They are already here. They have warp drive. They have weapons. Do we want them inside the tent pissing out or outside pissing in?" A crude metaphor, Goo bubbled, but accurate. "If we isolate them, they may become the monsters we fear. If we integrate them, perhaps we can civilize them." "Civilize them?" Thalric laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "Did you not see the Colonel? You do not civilize that. You only hope he is on your side." The vote was called. It was agonizingly slow. The prey species voted no, instinctively terrified. The predator species, recognizing a rival, hesitated but largely voted yes, respecting the strength. The neutrals, fearing what humanity might do if rejected, voted yes. The motion passed, narrowly. Thalric was the one sent to deliver the news. He found Vance and Sterling in the docking bay, looking out at the stars. "Ambassador," Thalric said, "the Council has approved your admission. You are probationary members." Vance turned. Her smile was genuine this time, or at least a very good simulation of it. "Thank you, Thalric. We won't disappoint you." "I hope not," Thalric said, "for all our sakes." Sterling looked at the Hylotian. "You guys have a cafeteria on this level? I'm starving." Thalric flinched. The casual admission of hunger from a creature that could snap his spine was visceral. "Yes, Deck 4. As the humans walked away, Thalric watched them. They moved with that same stalking grace. They were polite. They were intelligent, they were civilized. But Thalric knew what he had seen. He had seen the biometrics. He had seen the efficiency of the kill movement. The galaxy had just invited a tiger into the drawing room, hoping it would learn to drink tea. Thalric shivered. He had a feeling that eventually the tea would run out, and then the tiger would eat. Act 2. The friction of coexistence. 3 months had passed since the admission of the Terran Republic, and the Conclave had not imploded. Yet. The tension, however, was a tangible thing, a static charge in the air whenever a human entered a room. They were efficient, helpful, and shockingly competent. That was the problem. Thalric sat in the Grand Archive, trying to focus on trade dispute regulations between the Moltari and the Zil. Across the reading table sat Captain James Thorne, a human naval attaché who had been assigned to assist in logistics. Thorne was reading a datapad, his eyes scanning text at a rapid pace. Every few minutes he would reach into a bag and pull out a handful of nuts, tossing them into his mouth with a mechanical crunching sound. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Thalric's ear slits twitched. "Captain," he said softly. "Yeah." Thorne didn't look up. "Must you masticate so loudly?" Thorne stopped. "Sorry, almonds, good for brain function." He offered the bag to Thalric. Thalric recoiled. "Those contain cyanide compounds. Trace amounts," Thorne shrugged. "Adds flavor." Thalric stared. This was the daily horror of working with humans. They consumed toxins. They exposed themselves to radiation for tans. They engaged in recreational combat sports. Last week, Thalric had walked into the gymnasium to find 2 humans punching each other in the face while wearing padded gloves. When he had summoned security, they had laughed and said they were sparring. But it was the diplomatic negotiations where the friction was truly heat-generating. Later that cycle, the Council was mediating a border dispute between the Krell and the Uit. The Krell were aggressive, carapace-covered insectoids. The Uit were gaseous beings, slow and philosophical. The Krell were threatening to annex an Uit mining nebula. Ambassador Vance was present, sitting quietly at the edge of the table. The Krell ambassador, a clicking, chittering creature named Zex, was shouting, "Our brood needs the minerals. The Uit are too slow to harvest them. We take what we need. It is the law of nature." Zex slammed a claw onto the table. The strong take. The room went silent. All eyes turned to the humans. The Krell had inadvertently invoked the philosophy that everyone feared the humans secretly held. Vance leaned forward. Her microphone picked up the rustle of her sleeve. "Ambassador Zex," she said calmly, "strength is not a license for theft." Zex clicked his mandibles at her. "You speak of strength, soft skin? Your species is new. You do not know the hierarchy here. The Krell have crushed empires." Vance didn't blink. "And yet here you are arguing over a gas cloud." Zex hissed. "Do not mock us. We could sever your trade routes. We could blockade your little death world." Sterling, standing behind Vance, shifted his weight. The sound of his boots on the floor was heavy. Vance held up a hand. "Is that a declaration of war, Ambassador?" "No," Zex scoffed. "It is a statement of fact. You are weak. You rely on this council for protection." Vance stood up. She picked up a glass of water and drank it. The room watched her throat work. "We rely on the council for order," Vance said, "not protection." She walked around the table. The Krell guards stiffened, their weapons tracking her. Vance ignored them. She stopped inches from Zex. The insectoid towered over her, bristling with spikes. "You confuse civility with weakness," Vance said softly. "We adhere to these laws because we believe in them. But do not mistake adherence for inability." She tapped the table. "If you blockade us, we will not complain to the council. We will not file sanctions. We will simply remove the blockade." Zex clicked. "You would fight the Krell Armada?" Vance smiled. That terrifying, toothy smile. "Ambassador, on Earth we have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick." She leaned in closer. "We are speaking softly right now." The threat was implicit, heavy, and undeniable. The Krell ambassador, for all his biological armor, took a step back. He sensed the predator. He sensed the creature that didn't hunt for food, but for strategic objectives. The dispute was settled 2 hours later. The Krell withdrew their claim. After the session, Chorus approached Vance. "That was dangerous," the Drakari said. "You threatened a member species. I clarified our position," Vance replied, packing her documents. "You frightened them," Chorus said. "You frightened me?" "Good," Vance said. "Fear prevents unnecessary conflict." She walked away, leaving Chorus and Thalric standing in the corridor. "They are escalating," Thalric whispered. "They are becoming more comfortable." "They are establishing dominance," Chorus corrected. "They are marking their territory, and the terrifying thing is, it's working." The turning point came a month later. A distress signal arrived from the outer rim. A non-aligned species, the Vrax, had launched a raid on a council outpost. The Vrax were slavers, brutal and heavily armed. They had taken 300 hostages, including a dozen Hylotian hatchlings. The council was paralyzed. The bureaucracy demanded a committee to analyze the threat, a subcommittee to draft a resolution, and a vote to authorize a peacekeeping force. It would take weeks. Thalric was in the human embassy when the news broke. He was weeping, his composure shattered. "My sister's hatchlings," he sobbed. "They will be sold. They will be eaten." Colonel Sterling was cleaning a sidearm. It was a kinetic projectile weapon, archaic by galactic standards but brutal. "How long until the council authorizes a rescue?" Sterling asked. "Weeks," Thalric cried, "maybe months." Sterling looked at Vance. The ambassador was on a secure comms line. She nodded once. Sterling stood up. He slotted a magazine into the weapon with a metallic clack. "Thalric," Sterling said, "go home, get some sleep." "What? How can I sleep? Just go." The next morning the council chamber was in an uproar. News feeds were playing footage from the Vrax sector. A fleet of sleek black ships had dropped out of warp space directly into the Vrax formation. They hadn't hailed. They hadn't negotiated. They had opened fire. The footage was grainy, but the violence was clear. The human ships moved with suicidal aggression, closing the distance to use point defense cannons as offensive weapons. Boarding pods, literal torpedoes filled with soldiers, had slammed into the slaver flagship. The Vrax, terrified by an enemy that didn't care about self-preservation, had rooted. The hostages were recovered, all of them. Thalric stood in the center of the chamber as the human delegation walked in. They looked tired. Sterling had a bandage on his neck. Vance's uniform was rumpled. You acted without authorization. High Counselor Gu bellowed, his tank bubbling furiously. You violated the non-aggression pact with the Outer Rim. You risked war. We rescued the hostages, Vance said calmly. You bypassed the council. This is vigilante justice. It was justice, Vance shot back, her voice finally rising. While you were debating the semantics of intervention, children were being put in cages. We did not wait for permission to do the right thing. There was silence. Thalric looked at the humans. He looked at Sterling, who was leaning against a pillar, looking bored despite the fresh wound on his neck. They were monsters. They were killers. They had slaughtered the Vraks with an efficiency that made the Drakari look like amateurs. But his sister's hatchlings were safe. Thalric walked across the floor. The entire chamber watched. He approached Sterling. The colonel looked down. Hey, Thalric. Thalric extended a trembling manipulator. You saved them, Sterling shrugged. We don't like slavers. Thalric looked into those blue, forward-facing eyes. He saw the violence there. He saw the capacity for death. But for the first time, he didn't see a threat to himself. He saw a sheepdog, a creature that carried the wolf in its blood so that it could kill the wolves that came for the flock. Thank you, Thalric whispered. Don't mention it, Sterling said. The council voted to reprimand the humans, a slap on the wrist. They couldn't punish the heroes of the hour too harshly, but the atmosphere had changed permanently. The humans were no longer the new, awkward guests. They were the enforcers, and everyone knew it. Thalric sat with Chorus later that evening. We are safe, Thalric said, as long as we are their friends, and if we are not, Chorus asked. Thalric looked at the stars outside the window. Then God help us, he said, using a human phrase he had picked up. The unease never truly went away. When Vance smiled, the counselors still flinched. When Sterling cut his meat, conversation still stalled. But they were admitted. They were part of the family now. The crazy, violent, terrifying uncle who kept a shotgun by the door, but part of the family nonetheless. And as Thalric watched the humans laugh and drink their toxic coffee, he realized the true horror of the situation. It wasn't that they were pretending to be civilized. It was that for them, this was civilized. The violence wasn't a breakdown of their nature. It was a tool in their kit, sitting right next to diplomacy and art. They could write a sonnet in the morning and glass a planet in the afternoon and feel no contradiction. That was what made them apex, and that was why the galaxy would never sleep soundly again. The end.